Let's define judgment.
Accountability, clear track record is critical.
Let's define judgment. I would define it as knowing the long-term effects of your decisions or being able to predict the long-term effects of your decisions.
It's funny. My definition of wisdom is knowing the long-term consequences of your actions. So they're not all that different. Wisdom is just judgment on a personal domain. Wisdom applied to external problems, I think, is judgment. So they're highly linked. But yes, it's knowing the long-term consequences of your actions and then making kind of the right decision to capitalize on that. Judgment is very hard to build up. This is where both intellect and experience come in play. There are many problems with the so-called intellectuals in the ivory tower, but one of the reasons why Nassim Taleb rails against them is because they have no skin in the game. They have no real-world experience, right? So they just apply purely intellect. And intellect without any experience is often worse than useless because you get the confidence that the intellect gives you and you get some of the credibility. But because you had no skin in the game and you had no real experience and no real accountability, you're just throwing darts. The real world is always far, far more complex than we can intellectualize. And especially all the interesting, fast-moving edge domains and problems, you can't get there without experience. So if you are smart and you iterate fast, so it's not even you put 10,000 hours into something, but you take 10,000 tries at something. If you are smart and you have a lot of quick iterations and you try to keep your emotions out of it, the people with the best judgment are actually among the least emotional. A lot of the best investors are considered almost robotic in that regard, but I wouldn't be surprised if even the best entrepreneurs often come across as unemotional. There is this archetype of the passionate entrepreneur, and yeah, they have to care about what they're doing, but they also have to see very clearly what's actually happening. And the thing that prevents you from seeing what's actually happening are your emotions. Our emotions are constantly clouding our judgment. And in investing or in running companies or in building products or being an entrepreneur, emotions really get in the way. Emotions are what prevent you from seeing what's actually happening until you can no longer resist the truth of what's happening, until it becomes too sudden and then you're forced into suffering, which is a breaking of this emotional fantasy that you had put together.
To try and connect some of these concepts, I would say that first, you're accountable for your judgment. Judgment is the exercise of wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience, and that experience can be accelerated through short iterations.
And the reason why a lot of the top investors, a lot of the value investors, if you read Jeremy Grantham or you read Warren Buffett, you read up on Michael Burry, these people sound like philosophers, or they are philosophers, or they're reading a lot of history books or science books. Like, what are they doing? Shouldn't they be reading investment books? No, investment books are the worst place to learn about investment because investment is a real world activity that is highly multivariate. All the advantages are always being competed away. It's always on the cutting edge. So what you actually just need is very, very broad-based judgment and thinking. And the best way to do that is to study everything, including a lot of philosophy. And philosophy also makes you more stoic, makes you less emotional. And so you make better decisions. You have better judgment. One simple thing is I go out on Twitter, and it seems like half of Twitter is outrageous something at all times. You can go within someone's Twitter feed and get at least some semblance of what it must be like to be in their head all the time. And the more outraged somebody is, I guarantee you, the worse their judgment is. If someone's constantly tweeting political outrage and seems like an angry person getting into fights, you don't want to hand this person the keys to your car, let alone the keys to your company.
So we covered the skills that you need to get rich. That was specific knowledge, accountability, leverage, judgment, and lifelong learning. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of working hard and valuing your time.
So no one is going to value you more than you value yourself. So you just have to set a very high personal hourly rate and you have to stick to it. So even since when I was young, I just decided that I was worth a lot more than the market thought I was worth, but I started treating myself that way. So always factor your time into every decision. How much time does it take? Oh, it's going to take me an hour to get across town to get this thing. Well, I value myself at $100 an hour. That's throwing $100 out of my pocket. Am I going to do that? You buy something from Amazon, they screwed it up, you have to return it. Is it worth your time to return it? Is it worth the mental hassle? Keep in mind that you have less work hours, you have less mentally high output hours. Do you want to use them to run errands and solve little problems, or do you want to save them for the big stuff? All the great scientists were terrible at managing their household life. None of them had a clean, organized room or, made all their social events on time or sent their thank you cards. You can spend your life however you want, but if you want to get rich, it has to be your number one overwhelming desire, which means that it has to come before anything else, which means you can't be penny pinching. This is what people don't understand. You can penny pinch your way to a basic sustenance. You can keep your expenses low, maybe retire early and not spend too much. And that's perfectly valid. But we're here to talk about wealth creation. And if you're going to do that, then that has to be your number one overwhelming priority. So fast forward to your wealthy self and pick some intermediate hourly rate. For me, believe it or not, back when you could have hired me, which now obviously you can't, but back when you could have hired me, and this was true a decade ago or even 2 decades ago before I had any real money, my hourly rate, I used to say to myself over and over, is $5,000 an hour. Today, when I look back, really, it was about $1,000 an hour. And of course, I still ended up doing stupid things like arguing with the electrician or returning the broken speaker, but I shouldn't have. And I did a lot less than any of my friends would. And I would make a theatrical show out of throwing something in the trash pile or giving it to Salvation Army rather than trying to return it, or handing something to people rather than trying to fix it. I would argue with my girlfriends and even today to my wife, like, I don't do that. That's not a problem that I solve. I still argue that with my mother when she hands me like little to-dos. I just don't do that. I would rather hire you an assistant. And this was true even when I didn't have money. Another way of thinking about something is that if you can outsource something or not do something for less than your hourly rate, outsource it or don't do it. So if you can hire someone to do it for less than your hourly rate, hire them. That even includes things like cooking. Now, you may want to eat your healthy home-cooked meals, but if you can outsource it, do that instead. And I know some people will say, well, what about the joy of life? And what about getting it right just your way? Sure, you can do that, but you're not going to be wealthy because now you've made something else a priority. Paul Graham said it pretty well for Y Combinator startups. He said you should be working on your product and getting product market fit, and you should be exercising and eating healthy. Like, that's about it. That's kind of all you have time for while you're on this mission. So set a very high hourly aspirational rate for yourself and stick to it. And it should seem and feel absurdly high. If it doesn't, it's not high enough. And whatever you picked, my advice to you would be raise it. Like I said, for myself, even before I had money, for the longest time, I used $5,000 an hour. And if you extrapolate that out into what it looks like as an annual salary, it's multiple millions of dollars per year. Ironically, I actually think I've beaten it. When I look back, because I'm not the hardest working person, I'm actually kind of a lazy person. So I work through bursts of energy where I'm really motivated with something. So if I actually look at how much I've earned per actual hour that I've put in, it's probably quite a bit higher than that. So let's talk about hard work. There's this battle that happens on Twitter a lot between should you work hard and should you not. Like David Hauser's on there saying it's like you're slave driving people. And Keith Rabois is always on there saying like, no, all the great founders work their fingers to the bone. And they're talking past each other. First of all, they're talking about two different things. David is talking about employees in a lifestyle business, which is fine. Your number one thing in life, if you're doing that, is not getting wealthy. You have a job, you also have your family, you also have your life. But Keith is talking about the Olympics of startups. He's talking about the person going for the gold medal and trying to build a multi-billion-dollar public company. That person has to get everything right. They have to have great judgment. They have to pick the right thing to work on. They have to recruit the right team, and they have to work crazy hard because they're basically engaged in a competitive sprint. So if getting wealthy is your goal, you are going to have to work as hard as you can. But hard work is absolutely no substitute for who you work with and what you work on. What you work on is probably the most important thing. Finding product market founder fit, to expand on Mark Andreessen's definition, he came up with product market fit, but I would add product market founder fit, which is how well you are personally suited to that business. The combination of that three, that should be your overwhelming goal. And you can save yourself a lot of time if you pick the right area to work in. Picking the right people to work with is the next most important piece. And then third comes how hard you work. But they're like three legs of a stool. If you shortchange on any one of them, the whole stool is going to fall down. So it's not like you can pick one over the other that easily. So the order of operations when you're building a business is, or even building your career, is first figure out what should I be doing? What is something where there is a market that is emerging? There's a product that I can build that I'm excited to work on, and something where I have specific knowledge and I'm really into it. And then second, surround yourself with the best people possible. And no matter how high your bar is, raise your bar. Because you can never be working with other people who are great enough. If there's someone greater out there to work with, you should go work with them. I advise a lot of people who are looking at which startup to join in Silicon Valley. I say basically pick the one that's going to have the best alumni network for you in the future. Look at the PayPal mafia. They work with a bunch of geniuses, so they all got rich. So just try and pick based on the highest intelligence, energy, and integrity people that you can find. And then finally, once you've picked the right thing to work on and the right people to work with, then you work as hard as you can. This is where the mythology gets a little crazy. People will work 80, 120-hour weeks. A lot of that's just status signaling. It's showing off. Nobody really works 80 to 120 hours a week sustained at high output with mental clarity. Your brain breaks down. You just won't have good ideas. So really the way people tend to work most effectively, especially in knowledge work, is they sprint as hard as they can while they're working on something and they're inspired and they're passionate. And then they rest, they take long breaks. It's more like a lion hunting and much less like a marathon runner running. So you sprint, then you rest, you reassess, and then you try again. And what you end up doing is you end up building a marathon of sprints. Nivi just made the point to me on the side that inspiration is perishable, which is a very good point. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there. This happens to me a lot with my tweet storms. I've actually come up with a whole bunch of additional tweet storms besides the ones that are already out there. But sometimes I just hesitate or I just pause and then it just dies. And what I've learned is if I'm inspired to write a blog post or to publish a tweet storm, I should probably do it right away. Otherwise, it's not going to get out there. I won't come back to it. So inspiration is a beautiful and powerful thing. And when you have it, just seize it. So people talk about impatience. When do you know to be impatient? When do you know to be patient? My glib tweet on this was impatience with actions and patience with results. And I think that's actually a good philosophy for life. Anything you have to do, just get it done. Why wait? You're not getting any younger. Your life is slipping away. You don't want to spend it waiting in line. You don't want to spend it traveling back and forth. You don't want to spend it doing things that you know ultimately aren't part of your mission. And when you do them, you want to do them as quickly as you can while you do them well with your full attention. But then you just have to give up on the results. You have to be patient with the results because you're dealing with complex systems. You're dealing with lots of people. It takes a long time for markets to adopt products. It takes time for people to get comfortable working with each other. It takes time for great products to emerge as you polish away. So impatience with actions, patience with results. And as Nivi said, inspiration is perishable. So when you have inspiration, act on it right then and there. If I have a problem that I discover in one of my businesses that needs to be solved, I won't sleep until at least the resolution is in motion. And this is just a personal failing. But if I'm on the board of a company, I'll call the CEO. If I'm running the company, I'll call my reports. If I'm responsible, I'll get on there right then and there and solve it. If I don't solve a problem the moment it happens, or I don't start moving towards solving it the moment it happens, I have no peace. I have no rest. I have no happiness until that problem is solved. So solve it as quickly as possible. I literally won't sleep until it's solved. Maybe that's a personal characteristic, but it's worked out well in business. We squander our time with the death of 1,000 cuts. So another tweet I had was, you should be too busy to do coffee while still keeping an uncluttered calendar. People who know me know that I'm famous for simultaneously doing two things. One is having a very clean calendar. I have almost no meetings on it. And there are people that I meet with when they see my calendar, they almost weep. While at the same time, I am busy all the time. I'm always doing something. And it's usually quote unquote work related, but it is whatever the highest impact thing is that needs to be done at that time and that I'm most interested, inspired about. But the only way to do that is to constantly, ruthlessly decline meetings. People want to do coffee and build relationships, and that's fine early in your career when you're still exploring, but later in your career when you're exploiting and there are more things coming at you than you have time for, you have to ruthlessly cut meetings out of your life. If someone wants to do a meeting, see if you can do it with a phone call instead. If they want to do a phone call, see if they can do it with an email instead. If they want to do it with email, see if they can do it with a text message instead. If they're text messaging, you should probably be ignoring most text messages unless they're true emergencies. So one has to be utterly ruthless about dodging meetings. When you do meetings, do walking meetings, do standing meetings, keep them short, keep them actionable, keep them small. Any meeting with 8 people in it sitting around a conference table, nothing is getting done in that meeting. You're literally just dying 1 hour at a time.
Doing coffee reminds me of an old quote, I think, from Steve Jobs when they asked him, hey, why doesn't Apple come to conventions? Or why don't you come to my convention? And his response was, well, then because we wouldn't be here working.
Yeah, I used to have a tough time turning people down for meetings, but now I just tell them outright. I just say, look, I don't do non-transactional meetings. I don't do meetings without a strict agenda. I don't do meetings unless we absolutely have to. Nivi used to do this. He would email people when they would ask Nivi and I for a meeting, like coffee meeting, get to know you. He would say, we don't do meetings unless it's life and death urgent. And then that person has to respond, yeah, it's life and death urgent, or there's no meeting. When you have something important or something valuable, other busy, interesting people will meet with you. Your calling card has to be, hey, here's what I've done. Here's what I can show you. Let's meet and I'll be respectful of your time if this is useful to you. And I find that there are very busy, important people who will take your meeting, but you have to come with a proper calling card. All the people who tweet and who email famous or rich people saying, hey, if I could just get one meeting with you, and they're vague about it, they're not going to get anywhere in life. You have to build up the credibility. When, for example, an investor in the tech business and the venture business looks at a startup, the first thing they want to see is they want to see some evidence of product progress. They don't just want to even see a slide deck. They want to see product progress, because the product progress is the resume for the entrepreneur. It is the unshakable, unfakeable resume. So you have to do the work. To use a crypto analogy, you have to have proof of work. If you have proof of work and you truly have something interesting, then you shouldn't hesitate to put it together in an email and send it to somebody. But even then, when you're asking for a meeting, you want to be super actionable about it. But I would say, even the other side, even if you yourself haven't made it yet, if you think you're going to make it by going out and networking and doing a whole bunch of meetings, you're probably incorrect. Yes, networking can be important early in your career. And yes, you can get serendipitous with meetings, but the odds are pretty low. And as we spent time talking about earlier, when you are just meeting people and hoping to get that lucky break, you're relying on type 1 luck, which is blind luck, and type 2 luck, which is hustle luck. But what you're not getting is type 3 or type 4 luck, which are the better kinds, where you spend time developing a reputation, working on something, developing a unique point of view, and being able to spot opportunities that others can't. A busy calendar and a busy mind will destroy your ability to do great things in this world. If you want to be able to do great things, whether you're a musician or whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you're an investor, you need free time and you need a free mind.
We just finished talking about the importance of working hard and valuing your time. Next, there's a few tweets on the topic of working for the long term. The first tweet is, become the best in the world at what you do. Keep redefining what you do until this is true.
If you really want to get paid in this world, you want to be number one at whatever it is that you're doing. And it can be niche. That's the point. It can literally be you're getting paid for just being you. At this point, some of the more successful people in the world are that way. Oprah gets paid for being Oprah. Joe Rogan gets paid for being Joe Rogan. And they're being authentic to themselves. So what this tweet is trying to say simultaneously is that you want to be number one, but you want to keep changing what you do until you're number one. You can't just pick something arbitrary. You can't say, I'm going to be the fastest runner in the world, and now you got to beat Usain Bolt. That's too hard of a problem. But what you can do is you can keep changing what your objective is until it arrives to your specific knowledge, your skill sets, your position, your capabilities, your location, your interests, and then converges to making you number one. So when you're searching for what to do, you actually have two different foci that you have to keep in mind at all points. And one of those is, I want to be the best at what I do. And the second is, what I do is flexible so that I am the best at it, until you arrive at a comfortable place where you're like, yes, this is something I can be amazing at while still being authentic to who I am. And this is not going to be an overnight discovery. It's going to be a long journey, but at least you know how to think about it. The most important thing for companies to find product market fit. I would say the most important thing for an entrepreneur is to find founder product market fit, where you are naturally inclined to build the right product which has a market. And that's a 3 focus problem, which is you got to make all 3 of those work at once. If you want to be successful in life, you just have to get comfortable managing multivariate problems, multiple objective functions at once. And this is one of those cases where you have to map at least 2 or 3 at once.
This reminds me of your tweet about escaping competition through authenticity. It sounds like part of this is a search for who you are.
It's both a search and a recognition, because sometimes when we search our egos, we want to be something that we aren't. And our friends and family are better at telling us actually who we are, or looking back at what we've done is a better indicator of who we are. Peter Thiel talks a lot about how competition is besides the point. It's counterproductive. We're highly mimetic creatures. We copy what everybody else is doing around us. We copy our desires from them. If everyone around me is a great artist, I want to be an artist. If everyone around me is a great business person, I want to be a business person. Everybody around me is a social activist. I want to be a social activist. That's where my self-esteem will come from. You have to be a little careful when you get caught up in these status games that you end up competing over things that aren't worth competing over. So Peter Thiel talks about how He was going to be a law clerk because he was in law school and everybody around him wanted to be a law clerk for a Supreme Court justice or some famous judge. And he got rejected. And that's what made him go into business. So it helped him break out of a lesser game into a greater game. So sometimes you just get trapped in the wrong game because you're competing. And the best way to escape competition, to get away from the specter of competition, which is not just stressful and nerve-wracking, but will often drive you to just the wrong answer. The way to escape competition is to just be authentic to yourself. If you are fundamentally building and marketing something that is just an extension of who you are, no one can compete with you on that. Who's going to compete with Joe Rogan or Scott Adams? It's impossible. Is somebody else going to come along and write a better Dilbert? No. Is someone going to compete with Bill Watterson and create a better Calvin and Hobbes? No. They're being authentic. This is easiest to see in art. Artists are, by definition, all naturally authentic. But even entrepreneurs are authentic. Who's going to be Elon Musk? Who's going to be Jack Dorsey? These people are authentic, and the businesses and products that they create are authentic to their desires and their means. If somebody else came along and started launching rockets, I don't think it would phase Elon one bit. He's still going to get to Mars because that's his mission. Insane as it seems, that's the one he set for himself, and he's going to accomplish it. So authenticity naturally gets you away from competition. It doesn't mean that you necessarily want to be authentic to the point where there's no product market fit. It may turn out you're the best juggler on a unicycle, but maybe there just isn't that much of a market for that, even with YouTube videos. So you got to adjust that somehow until you find product market fit, but at least lean towards authenticity, towards getting away from competition, and competition automatically leads towards copycatting and often towards just playing completely the wrong game. Especially in entrepreneurship, the masses are never right. If you see a lot of people tweeting about what a great market to enter is, or you see journalists talking about a company is terrible, they don't know anything. If the masses knew how to build great things and create great wealth, we'd all already be done. We'd all already be rich by now. So in a sense, when you see a lot of competition, sometimes that indicates to you that the masses are already here. So it's already competed over too much and there's nothing here, or it's in the wrong trend to begin with. On the other hand, if it's completely empty, if the whole market is empty and no one's there, that can also be a warning indicator that you've gone too authentic and not enough on the product market fit part of founder product market fit. So there's a balance. You have to find it. But generally, most people will make the mistake of paying too much attention to the competition and being too much like the competition and not being authentic enough. And the great founders tend to be authentic iconoclasts.